Right. Looks like we have a few more people join us, but we'll go ahead and kick things off here. As you guys start to join and get connected and everything, if you have any questions, feel free to shoot those in the chat box and we'll be happy to help you out. But I want to welcome everybody to the 5th iteration of our Leadership Symposium, our virtual webinar series. Today we'll be focusing on the technology department. You've seen some of their faces in some previous chapters, but we'll be able to focus on some different elements of pieces that you've seen and really dive into some of those a little bit deeper. So we're really excited to have you guys with us. For anyone who might be joining us for the first time in this series, our Leadership Symposium is an interactive, highly engaging virtual meeting that will allow you to develop a thorough understanding of services and resources that IAAO has available to you and your organization. Our purpose is to share information to chapter and affiliate leaders like yourselves to converge and learn about IAAO offerings. Formal introductions of staff and departmental overviews will be shared throughout this series of webinars. As you may know by now, GSA is a big vital part of making this webinar series happen for us. Their sponsorship means a lot. Earlier this year, there was a lot of question marks as we had to kind of pivot to a lot of different angles of how we would host events such as this one. This used to be an in-person event, but because of GSA's support, we can bring this to you, this virtual series, throughout this whole summer and a couple more months leading through the end of the year, and really give you guys that chance to see us face to face and meet with us. So a huge thank you to GSA. If you don't know much about GSA, they offer a full suite of software for local government, including CAMA, collections, and municipality solutions. Visit their website, you'll see there on the slide. So for more information, go to www.cama.io. So moving on, as you guys know, like I mentioned before, this is the 5th chapter of this series. So what departments does IAAO have? As you can see there, we've been kind of going in order. So we have our membership department, professional development department, meetings, marketing and communication. Today we focus on technology. And we have our administration and professional consulting services. And, we often, when you break it down this way, you see that list. And even myself, I'm like, man, we really do have a lot of departments. A smaller office, you feel like you team up on so many projects that it doesn't necessarily feel like you have that many departments at times. So it's sometimes really fun to show this list and really think, you might work with someone on a few different things. You might interact with a few of us, but we have quite a team, and there might be some overlap in those, but we couldn't do it without any of those parts. And technology is definitely one of those departments that really kind of holds everything together and gives us that leverage to, deliver everything that those other departments have and communicate it out to you. So we're really excited to show you some of the features and best practices that the technology department's been using to utilize that and give you that information. So a quick rundown, and I'll hand it over to Mike here. As you can see, there is the technology department. You'll see some familiar names, as you may have met with a few of them or seen them in some previous series, but today we'll focus on a few different aspects, and I will turn over to Mike to talk more about that.
Okay, good afternoon. My name is Mike Artis. I'm Senior Director of Communications, Technology, and Publication, and I'm joined with Sean York, our Technology Manager, Sarah Noakes is our Learning Technology Manager, and Daniel, the moderator, also plays an important role in our department. And then primarily what I do is a lot of communications, and for those of you who were on the previous call, you probably heard some of the things we could do. Communications is probably one of the main areas I work on. A lot of that also involves media relations, working with the press on what's going on with IAAO. Also work on the website and the website operations, and then just other things regarding, say, programming, whether it's reports or emails or, assisting with some of the things on the database. So those are the main things I work on. And I'll let Sean go over.
Yeah, so I'm Sean York, the Technology Manager for IAAO. These are just a few of my primary responsibilities. So when we talk about database management, we use a program called IMIS, which manages our website, our content there. as well as all of our records and education records and all of your guys' contact information. Additionally, do a lot of the website maintenance, so adding new pages, collaborating with other departments on their content and their pages, and then internal network maintenance as well. So also point of contact for outside vendors. With it being a smaller association, we leverage a number of outside resources. So Mike and myself kind of tackle those responsibilities as far as being the point person with various accounts and consultants. And then the next slide, Sarah, who you guys have all met in a previous chapters, as Daniel mentioned, I think she touched on a lot of what she does with the professional development department, but she's a great resource if you guys are taking any online classes or have any troubleshooting in that area that you need. She's a great resource for online course support. And then Daniel.
As you guys, and me, you've heard me blabber a little bit in each of these meetings, but again, like I get the chance to work with this department. My home may be in membership, but working across departments, we wear a lot of hats, as many of you guys do in your office as well. So, I help Mike with the conference mobile app, webinars, online course support, and meetings and conference support. And, some of you guys have seen this in action, things like the webinars, we're there to moderate and, just as I'm doing here, to not only lend as like a hosting role, but just to kind of help support in the background if you guys are having any kind of those small issues, so they can be taken care of without being on the spotlight, and whoever's presenting can carry on with as seamless of a presentation as we can. And that sort of same responsibility rolls over into the online course support. As you know, we work with the instructors. We've been pushing a lot of the live online courses lately, and they've been going well. We actually have one going on today as we speak, and it's one of those things. To anything, we can take a little bit of weight off the instructor's shoulders so they can focus on the material, and we can help with the back end stuff and getting things prepared for that you've heard Sarah speak on with like Proctor Free and the online proctoring services and things like that. So we try to offer that support to really clear up the instructor's job so that they can really just move forward and focus on teaching the students. And in terms of meeting and conference support, as as many of you guys are dealing with too, a lot of our meetings this year have gone virtual, as we are. As right now, we just finished up conference virtual, and it's been a challenging but fun experience, honestly. We're taking a lot of the same meat of the conference and getting to deliver that to you guys virtually. And it may take a few different ways to deliver that, whether it be Zoom or WebEx, as you guys know, but trying to offer as much support as we can to kind of bridge the gap. And again, using the technology department and their tools to deliver the content the conference and the meetings department puts together. So it's definitely a team effort, and we've seen a lot of that this year specifically, and exciting to kind of pull off everything that we have thus far. So, there'll be some sort of online meetings moving forward. I don't think they'll ever necessarily leave us completely, but it's going to be interesting, next couple of years just for everybody as we proceed through that.
Okay, thanks. And then, so today we wanted to go over just a couple of technology areas that we deal with a lot, and just some of the things that might help you and what you deal with, whether in chapters or also just in your day-to-day business. So, one of the biggest things we worry about is cybersecurity. And obviously, during the past year, since everybody's moved more remotely, we've been more dependent upon just whether our internet connections, and just dealing with things over whether email or the internet. So we'll go over that in a minute. And in the last meeting, we talked some about the various email options that we use to get our message out to our members. So some of the other things we'll talk about today also are just various video options for connecting with other members. Next is on VPNs, we do that so when we connect back to our office, it's just trying to make it more secure. So there's a sort of a firewall between us and other people. And then lastly, we'll also just cover just various documents and other tools that are out there that are available for you to use. So And then we'll start off just kind of with cybersecurity. You know, anytime you read in the newspaper or online, you just see other people who've gotten various issues about whether it's ransomware or other problems getting hacked or other things. So, you know, the biggest thing that we really worked on was talking with our technology vendor just to talk about the different scenarios out there and what they've seen, and then, you know, what were the, if they had any concerns with our setup. So we just kind of reviewed that just to kind of get a better idea of where we were at, and, you know, what we needed to do. The biggest thing probably is just making sure you have your data backed up. We kind of look at it in what we view as kind of three scenarios. You know, the most common is someone will accidentally say they deleted a file. So we have a separate sort of a backup device that we can then access and get those files returned. But and the next step is, in case there's something, a like piece of damaged equipment, whether it's a server or something else, you know, we've got those files backed up off the server. So if necessary, we can move that information back to a new server or something. And lastly, we also daily back up information offsite to Denver, just so, you know, in case something could happen to the building. You know, we're in the Midwest, there's always the potential for a tornado or something like that, or a fire. Just, you know, we just want to make sure that, you know, we had everything covered. And also, more recently, in the case of if you did ever get hacked or ransomware, you know, you've got a copy of your data you could go back to if need be. And so, you know, the big thing was just kind of preparing for different scenarios. And so, you know, we're pretty well, I think, set for if something would happen, we would be ready. So then I'll turn it over to Sean, kind of talk about the next step on just kind of virus protection.
Thanks, Mike. I think the big thing, I'm sure all of you at this point have at least some sort of virus protection running. At a minimum, you likely have Windows Defender, excuse me, Windows Defender antivirus. It comes baked into Windows. That's definitely improved over the years. You know, 5-10 years ago, you're looking at some sort of third-party program to protect your computer, but Windows Defender has really stepped up over the last few years. You're probably looking at, you know, running in tandem some sort of anti-malware software. Malwarebytes is a very popular one that we see used a lot. We use Semantic here in the office in cohesion with the Windows Defender. For all these things to work as well, I think the biggest thing is that we really stay proactive with ensuring all of our equipment is up to date. You know, a lot of these attacks, these intrusion attacks, come because there's some sort of vulnerability that gets discovered within the Windows software. So as soon as those get patched, those become obsolete as far as liability is concerned. So we were really pretty aggressive with our update cycle with all of our equipment. The other part of this is, you know, even with staying current on updates, even with these third-party software programs, the biggest thing that we really emphasize is the people training. No matter what, you know, you're trying to find that fine line of being protected, but also being able to do your job. If everything's 100% locked down at all times, it makes your job really difficult to be able to run programs or access the files that you need to, or collaborate virtually or share documents. So that, you know, you're never going to be 100% protected, and with that becomes the opportunity for you know, people to make a mistake and download something they shouldn't, or click a link that they shouldn't. So the most common attempts that we see, we do see malicious attachments coming through that might try to run on your computer and work its way into the server as well. That's where some of those encryptions come into play. But also you see various key logging attempts. So you might see a link that says, you know, hey, to access this file that someone shared with you, go to this link and sign in with your Windows credentials. And it looks very, very official. It looks like you're doing everything correctly, but what it's doing is it's logging your keystrokes as far as your username and your password, and it's going to steal your credentials that way. So just the biggest thing that you can do is, kind of stay up to date on those current trends, and the big red flags to look for. You're always going to see spoofed email attempts, so you're going to see what looks like the name of a coworker or an associate. But if you need to kind of dig down and see the actual email address, that's likely not going to match up with what their legit one is. The biggest thing I stress is you're rarely going to get an email with an unsolicited attachment. Attachments are coming as a result of an ongoing project or a conversation that you had or an existing email thread. Very rarely you're going to get something that's legitimate that comes in a form of attachments. So always look out for those. It's always just a red flag anytime you're dealing with an attachment. Another big thing that you're going to see in these email attempts are going to be typos. Just read through it. They're all designed to get you to act quickly and just react. So the common ones that we see are, it's from your boss or an executive director or a board member. It looks like them. They're asking if you have a quick moment, and they're hoping that you respond, and then they start this dialogue where they're telling you that they need gift cards quickly. We're making a donation somewhere, or we're doing a raffle, or whatever the case. We quickly need you to get these gift cards, and then they're going to ask for those gift card numbers. We see those come up, and at this point, everyone will once those go out, we've instructed them to just notify me or Mike. Because we have our staff webpage up, these people will take the time to look at that website, and they rarely send these to me or Mike because we're in the technology department. So they just pick a random other person on staff to try and target them, or they'll pick 4 or 5 people. So whenever those come out, we like to send out the screenshot of that just to everyone to be aware, like, hey, this is not legit. Just delete this and move on with your day. So once a month we try and share that information with staff. We try and reemphasize at least quarterly, going in a little bit more of a deep dive with that training. But if you read those articles that Mike mentioned about those encryptions, that's how they're getting in. That's how they're happening. These places are large institutions, and they certainly have virus protection in place and other software. But the reality is, if someone clicks an attachment and they run it on their PC, they make a poor decision. There's no protecting against that. So that can definitely happen. But yeah, we do that as a result of me and Mike doing our research and doing our training, and we also, as he mentioned, we have an outside vendor that's local in Kansas City that assists with doing those assessments and making sure all of our equipment is up to date, both with our antivirus programs and our Windows programs.
And then just kind of related to that, one of the things we've also tried to do is just kind of trying to eliminate the potential for collecting data or having data available that we don't want to lose track of. So, we try and do most of our sales for our conferences and meetings and everything over the internet. So it's all tracked through that separate program. In the past, a lot of people would send us forms with the credit card information. And in the past, we would be able to, they could send it by fax because it was just over the digital or analog line. So there was, in a sense, no real track of it. We've since moved to a digital fax. So now it sends us a copy by email. So we've had to kind of move to, when we have a form for a meeting and people want to give us a credit card information, we've just had to, in a sense, block out the area and say, hey, call us with the credit card. So that way there's, in a sense, no digital record of what that person's credit card is. It's just kind of looking out for ways to, where you're susceptible and what you can get around or get away with or get around. And, that's kind of been the challenge, is just because we do so many things with people's credit cards, is we've had to look for ways to protect ourselves. And, that really is kind of an extra step, and it's a little bit cumbersome making people call in, but it's in looking at our options, that's probably the best option if people aren't going to, register online. So, and then the other thing is next is just our various, we were talking about our video options. As everybody is now aware of Zoom, we kind of got involved in that in 2018. IAAO's International Research Symposium was over in Australia in 2019. So, trying to set up calls with them, we'd looked at we'd had calls with people in South Africa with Skype and so forth, but we were just kind of in 2018 just kind of testing out Zoom, and it was working pretty well. We'd started out with this free account. The problem was, it's a 40-minute maximum for meetings of more than 2 people. Then we just added, just a basic account for $15 a month, and we've added several more now just because with the pandemic and everything, there's just a lot of requests for Zoom meetings. There's some other options, whether it's like Microsoft Teams or WebEx, but one of the things I like about Zoom is just it's real easy to set up a background. So it might appear that I'm in the office. I'm actually in my basement right now, but I was able to easily put a shot of my office back up so it looks better. There's some ways to do it, and Teams and WebEx is just a little more involved. So, I know there were stories earlier this year about on Zoom about, I don't think that no one had any ideas what would be required this year, and so they had some issues with people hacking into or Zoom bombing various calls and stuff. So they've had to upgrade their security and so forth. But still, overall, to us, it's the easiest program to run, and it really does what we need. The Teams is included with 365. WebEx has a free account also, and they have a basic account. And actually for our webinars, we use WebEx, but that's built into another program. So, there's a lot of different things out there, in addition, Skype and so forth. So it's just kind of trying to figure out what works for you and so forth. And so far we felt Zoom works best for us.
All right, so going into some of the communication and more specifically just collaboration with more and more offices and associations and groups just working remotely, there's definitely an increased need in these collaboration cloud-based productivity tools. So as of now, us as a staff, we haven't really standardized one set of tools. What we found is working with a lot of our members, what is allowed to be used and everyone's comfort level just varies drastically. So we kind of use just kind of a mix match of different programs. So right off the bat, Google Docs, I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with, but if not, it's a web-based, basically kind of a scaled down office suite of docs and spreadsheets that allow you to collaborate in real time. It's really easy to set up. It's really easy to set the granular controls as far as who has access and what access they have when working on those documents. So it's a very common platform for us to use. Over the years, we've done a lot of a lot of paper forms that we've then transitioned to online PDF forms, but then managing, which version of PDF form is out there. And we found that, they can float around for a while. And if we ever want to make changes, we kind of get a bunch of different versions sent back to us over time. So we've leveraged Google Forms as well. It's a real basic form builder, but it does what we need for a lot of our applications, and you can sync that up with a Google spreadsheet. So those results from that online form just get shot right over to a spreadsheet that you can export and access. So we've leveraged that in a number of cases. And again, these are all free utilities that are out there, which is also why they're just kind of easy to get up and running with. A few years back, we kind of got involved with Office 365. We had an on-premise hosted email server, and we got away from that and just made the leap over to Office 365, which allowed us for a lot more cloud storage and a lot more storage space in general for our users when it comes to email. So with that, there's a number of tools, including Microsoft Teams, as Mike mentioned. I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with Dropbox or Google Drive or OneDrive from Microsoft. Those are all examples of online storage solutions. The one thing that's great about those is the barrier for sharing documents and collaboration is much lower. You're always looking at the most recent version. You don't have to worry about tracking down email attachments and everything. One thing I would caution about, especially over the last 7 months, as we've we've kind of quickly pivoted to using those applications is, take note of if the employees or your peers are using personal accounts. What can happen with those situations is if those documents only live in those personal accounts, if that employee ever leaves, access to those documents goes with them. So if you're really starting to look into leveraging some of these cloud-based tools, definitely look at setting up, having an administrator set up specific office accounts that belong to the office, and that access is shared amongst a few people. So if that employee ever leaves, you do have access to those files and those documents, because the last thing you want to do is lose a lot of resources and work that are tied to those accounts. The last piece on here is Slack. Slack, there's a few tools out there. I know Google's making a push for their platform with their suite of tools for Google Chat. There's Microsoft Teams, Slack. I know there's a number of them out there, but we use Slack internally here just for easy chat. Not everything requires a formal email thread and or a phone call or whatever. So Slack is really great. Just we have a few social threads just to stay in touch with all us being out of the office all the time. You kind of lose some of that social aspect. So we leverage it for that. Slack's also great. You can do video calls within that platform. You can drag files into a chat, which makes it even easier than opening up an email and attaching and sending it that way. So there's a number of plugins as well that operate within Slack to make it a little bit more full featured. But we've been using that for a few years, and it's been really smooth for us. The thing I talked about this a bit on the last session last month. Technology, all these pieces, it's ever evolving. It's very broad. It can get really specific and really dense. So the biggest thing I want to emphasize today is, don't hesitate to reach out to Mike or myself if you guys are ever looking for new solutions, especially in your chapter and affiliates where those resources might be a little bit different than what you're experiencing in your jurisdiction. We can always help talk through, what we've experienced, what we've tried out. Not everything that we've tried we still use. We always work through and do the pros and cons and figure out what works best for us. So never hesitate, shoot us an email, give us a call. We're always happy to talk through what we're experiencing, and we're obviously, as a result of this work from home increase, there's been a huge explosion in new resources and new platforms and products pivoting all the time. So we might not be up on the very latest and greatest, but we're always happy to help talk things through and share opinions on any of these programs.
Awesome. Thank you, Sean. And I had a question that was sent to me that I wanted to address too, kind of about something I'd mentioned on my slide regarding, conference and meeting support. A lot of you guys are starting to host meetings that are going to have to be virtual, and not just, hopping on a call to discuss a project or something like that, but you might be hosting like your own webinars or courses or things like that you haven't, done. And it's always been something, just from our experience that we wanted to do. Like we'll get to it, like we got this, like slowly but surely. But then when everything happened, we kind of had to pivot a little quicker than anticipated. But like it's been great. But like just wanted to, this person had asked, a couple pointers for someone who might be doing that for the first time, ways to enhance the experience. And, to be honest, at the end of the day, it's still going to keep that Zoom kind of format. A couple of things that we've done, and we've been, lucky to have some resources, but, we've enhanced, whether it's our camera or things like that, like even just getting a nicer webcam maybe than the one that's built into the computer, to kind of set up, think about the end result, right? Like if you have students on a call or a seminar that's going to be a few hours long, like we all know what Zoom fatigue is. So no matter what platform you're presenting on, you're going to have that kind of fatigue. And so thinking about the end results, teaching students teaching, a presentation for a seminar or webinar or something like that, you might have to kind of shift the format a little bit to be a little bit better to digest in a digital format. For example, slides, you might want to trim them down a little bit, or just like change some of the verbiage on there, because as people, they're not going to see you walking around a presentation hall and things like that. So kind of work backwards in that planning. If you have like a little bit nicer camera, if any of you attended the leadership days this weekend, we did our best to try to put some emphasis on the podium so you guys could hear some of the general discussions and things like that. It doesn't need to be anything extremely fancy, but if you're dealing with webcam from that might be like 10 years old, maybe it's time to spend a little bit on it, upgrade that, because if someone's going to be kind of staring at a screen for a while, it gives it a little bit of some personality to it. So think about your setup, think about you being comfortable. If you're the one presenting, approach it from that aspect as well. You're going to be talking for a long time to a screen, not to some people. And that can either feel like an eternity, or it can go by really fast because it's a little chaotic trying to manage all the pieces and handle questions and things like that. So start simple, build it up. It doesn't need to be full on production from the start, but just kind of think about the end result, work yourself backwards, thinking about how you want this to be digested on that end. And think about that end user and kind of work back from there.
Yeah, and I would say too, take the time. All of us, obviously we're on Zoom now. We've all attended as an attendee, but not all of us have set up a Zoom meeting. So don't let Jill tell you any different. Setting up a Zoom as an admin, scheduling that, it's not too scary. There's a lot of options and features, but to what Daniel was saying, as far as kind of working back, think about what you want that end result to be, and then review the different settings when setting up your Zoom, because there's a lot of different options as far as how people enter the meeting. What rights do they have? Are they muted on entry? Are you going to allow them to share the webcam? Do you want to allow them to share their screen? All those little things that make hosting a Zoom a lot easier when you can set those settings up when the meeting opens, versus having everything enabled and then trying to walk back all those features once the floodgates open and everyone's in that room. So it's really not too much. Just like I said, just take a little time and familiarize yourself if you're facing that as a potential activity that you're going to have to do. It's not overly complicated, I promise.
That's a great point. And set yourself up for success in terms of that preparation. If you're presenting, you're hosting for the first time. So you're not even just presenting, you're the one that's going to start these meetings, whether it's a chapter meeting that you have to do virtually, as we know, a lot of you guys are dealing with. You're like, okay, I'm going to be logging in. I'm going to be watching the chat over here, making sure people are muted over here, but advancing slides. Make it easy on yourself. Don't be afraid to script a few things, or give yourself a rough outline, give yourself those notes, because we know you're multitasking. It's different. Like Sean said, there's a lot of settings, there's a lot of layers to this, but if you work backwards instead of trying to learn what every single thing is, it makes it a lot easier. So knowing exactly what you need, you can be like, okay, that feature doesn't matter. Don't need to worry or stress about that. And then another kind of tip, record your meetings. If you have that capability, record them. We know everyone has some crazy schedules nowadays and can come to some things and miss some. It kind of gives second life to any of your meetings or materials. So if you have that capability in that space, whether it's on your account or saving it to the computer, most of these programs have both that option. It doesn't hurt to record it. And if you don't need to do anything with it, then that's fine. But it gives you that option. You can, like we'll do with this series, we'll put it on our YouTube channel as part of a playlist, so you guys can revisit that. It helps a lot of people. You can look back and be like, oh man, like I was staring off in the complete wrong direction, or like I was turned and, not engaged, and I'm just staring over here the whole time. So it's almost a self-critique as well. You can kind of see it like, okay, let's get this squared up. There's a lot of weird light in my background, things like that. The simplest, fixes make your communication just a little bit more genuine and rich. It's not going to be an in-person, but you can still kind of make it as personal as you can, we know you're presenting from home. That's okay. I'm in my room, like it's just going to be one of those things. It doesn't need to be a studio. It doesn't need to have the most professional background, but just keep those things in mind. If there's distractions or bad lighting, just try your best to work with what you got, even if it's just turning a little bit.
And as Daniel mentioned, YouTube's another good resource if you're wanting to have your presentations preserved. It's really easy to use as well. I mean, it's literally dragging a file over to their upload platform on their website, and you give it a title and you click upload, and away it goes. So there's a few other granular settings that you can definitely familiarize yourself with. If it's something that you're only wanting to share with a certain audience, there's a checkbox that just makes it unlisted, so only the people that have the link itself can watch it, and it's not going to be publicly searchable or publicly accessible. So it's really not too difficult. You're editing, maybe half an hour of editing real basic trims and at the beginning and end of a meeting can go a long way of cutting out some of that dead space. That's all easily done within, Microsoft's got a Photos app that you click a couple sliders and you trim at the end and the beginning of it, click save. Again, these things can seem really daunting, the idea of editing a video and uploading a video to the internet. But again, it's not too tough. It can get very complicated, and you can get very fancy with your editing, but the basics are not too difficult.
And that's a great point. I'm glad you brought up YouTube, because there are a few other options, but we use YouTube personally because it's like Sean mentioned, it's a free option. You may be familiar with Vimeo and some other hosting sites, and if you have accounts with those, like, great. It's one of those kind of comparisons. If you have one and it's working fine for you, it's probably not worth really drastically changing anything because they're all very similar. But YouTube is free. You can upload things, and I wanted to hit home, and Sean hit it right in the head, that you can, have different upload privacy settings like the unlisted. And it's a great way to share something with, a meeting, but not necessarily something you want to share and distribute through the world. So, look into those options. And that brings up, we had a question a couple symposium presentations ago about how to best prepare and do a quick training with one of your speakers. If you're hosting a meeting, do a training with that speaker just to get in there. Even if you're like, they've used Zoom, they know it. Just get the two of you or whoever's going to be, hosting and presenting in that meeting in the same room. There's a few simple questions you can go over. This really kind of will help you familiarize yourself with the situation. You kind of learn how they operate, things like that. You don't necessarily need to go through a whole dry run, but just get in the same room, walk through some basic things of how you'll start the meeting, letting them present and how you'll close the meeting, or handling any questions, things like that. That goes a long way. And I recommend doing that, close-ish to the meeting, like a week before or something. So it's still kind of fresh. Nothing's too, daunting. You memorize it, and then you take 2 weeks off. You might not remember. So do a quick training. It doesn't have to be long. And it just kind of gets some dialogue, and it'll help you eliminate any hurdles or surprises of the presentation.
So I think you guys have heard us talk enough. We'd like to open it up to you all. Obviously we've been through a historic event over these last 7 months and have really made a lot of changes and pivots into how our business operates. So does anyone have anything they want to share as far as, a tool or anything that they've leveraged or learned, not necessarily these last 7 months, but at all, that could be beneficial to your peers?
Okay, you guys all know I'm never afraid to talk. So this is Lane. How you doing? A couple comments. One, even though both my laptops have cameras and mics, I went out and bought a Logitech camera that mounts on the top of my screen. I think it's better quality. There's a mic included. And one of my pet peeves is people come in on a phone and you ask them, why are they on a phone? Well, my computer doesn't have a camera or a microphone. I said, you just go buy a Logitech camera and microphone, $58, plug it in, USB, done, So that's one thing that I have a hard time with when people keep calling in on phone. I get it when we first started, but now, you know, we're 9 months into this. You should find some way to do that. So we're actually requiring with certain meetings and things where there's going to be votes, we ask, you know, that you come in on video and have not on a phone. The other thing that we've found, we've been doing a lot of webinars and meetings and stuff, and we found that there's around 30 people you can do on a Zoom meeting, and it doesn't get too complicated, and you can kind of answer the questions by just people turning on their microphone and stuff like that. But when you get, I've done a couple that were up over 100, and it's so much easier to, I was the moderator on a couple of them, and to follow questions, it's so much easier to be in the webinar version of Zoom, because then you have the Q&A, and if there's a whole bunch of people putting in questions, it keeps it in order on the Q&A as you go down, so you can kind of just follow them, and then there's a way to click it to say that you've answered that one, and it goes out. Where chat, I've found you could be reading a chat question, and you know, a whole bunch more questions come in, and all of a sudden it bounces up and you've lost the question you were reading, you know. So I think there's a break off. I would say it's around 30, but I was wondering what you guys think, where the break off is, where a Zoom meeting really should be a webinar.
Well, and that's why we use WebEx for our webinars, because just we tend to have, whether it's 75 or up to a couple hundred people on that. So, I mean, the Zoom we've, I think, used more just for whether meetings like this are smaller. And then kind of just to follow up what you were saying on the webcams, you know, earlier this year, there was, everyone was trying to buy them, so they're difficult to get. You know, I think they're pretty easier to get now. Earlier this summer, I will say, you kind of get what you pay for a little bit. The Logitechs are good ones. Prior to the conference, we were grabbing a couple other ones from these other companies that they look like the Logitech, but they're just not quite plug and play, and the sound wasn't as good and the picture wasn't as good. So, you know, I will say
the microphone may or may not work at all.
Yeah. We have to do a lot of working in your systems to figure out how to get the microphone to work. So, you know, the Logitechs are really good. They're pretty much just, you plug them in and they're ready to go.
Yeah, I found mine was great. Is plug it in and off we're going, you know.
Yeah.
I did a bunch of testing between the different cameras that I have and stuff, and this one works great. It's just, I really, you know, I don't know, can you tell? So, and Mike, mine's, I'm not there either. That's a picture of my office.
Yeah, so I think I'd scare people off with my basement photo background.
But yeah, as Mike mentioned, you know, that I wouldn't necessarily say they're easy to come by right now, but they're definitely easier. I think the other part that was happening was, you know, with supply and demand, those Logitechs, if you could find them, they were going for, you know, over $100 when they normally would go for 50 or 60 bucks. So earlier this week, I was telling Mike earlier, I saw Target and Amazon both had like the C920, which is what a lot of us use. They had them on sale for like 60 or 65. I just checked before this. They're out of stock currently, but they kind of come in waves. So yeah, the external camera definitely makes a big difference for sure.
Yeah. Well, and then some people, if all you have is just your laptop and the camera on the top of the laptop, people have said, you know, you put it on books just so you don't get that picture or that image that's kind of looking up at you. You can, you know, it's better to get it kind of a straight on look. So especially if you're doing some presentation, if it's just an informal meeting, that's fine. But any kind of presentation, it's really worth trying to figure out, doing some testing and just figuring out what's the best look.
And that's a great point, Mike. You know, like we referenced to training, and that kind of helps eliminate. Like, so if you think your setup might be great and ready to roll, just do a quick call, a test with whoever your moderator is, and then run through a couple options. It's a perfect time to try to break things, try to mess things up, and be like, oh, like my microphone, or just to make sure that the right microphone is being used. You know, as you plug in some stuff, it's usually pretty easy, but sometimes the program might want to use a different microphone, some built-in one somewhere else. So it's a good trial run, and that's a great way to eliminate those, and then also logging into your meetings if you're the host and the presenter a little bit early and being like, and just hearing it and seeing everything set up and be like, we're good to go. Cool. Take a break, stay logged in and you're good to go. It helps eliminate a lot of those barriers.
Yeah, I would, and to add to that, we kind of experienced this a little bit with the virtual conference. If you're going to be presenting or if hosting for that matter, when you do those trial runs, make sure you're on the same equipment, the same device that you're going to be using in the actual meeting. We had a few people that went through, a few rounds of training for the virtual conference on one computer. And then when they actually came to do the actual attending and presenting part of it, they're on a completely different computer with, different camera or different microphone or different web browser or whatever the case. And it was kind of starting from scratch with getting them up and running. So it's just kind of little things that you might take for granted, but can make a real difference in your presentation.
So I don't know if this is you guys or on a higher level, but after the survey for the conference, and probably more for you guys, what the technology was. How were the comments coming back on the technology and how it worked? I had quite a hard time getting on Sunday, and then finally got it worked out. But I had to play with all kinds of settings on my computer to get it to work. So what was, I don't know if you can comment. I don't know if you're supposed to, or that's going to come from higher up, but just wondering.
Yeah, I think generally speaking, I think right now, I think understanding and patience and stuff is at a pretty high level right now when it comes to these virtual technologies and everything. But we did have a few hiccups. There were small ones and there were big ones, and we always work to try and minimize those. With our virtual conference, we were working with a few different vendors in collaboration to produce that. And I think overall the feedback was really good. I think a lot of people really appreciated the fact that we made an effort to put this on rather than just completely canceling the event. I know across the industry and just the world in general, there's it's not everyone's making that effort. The path of least resistance at this point is just to pack it in for the year and try again next year. So, and with us, it was, I can't remember, mid to late June, maybe even July, that, it was like 100% for sure. We'd been making strides and preparing for that being inevitable. So it was a pretty quick pivot for us to go fully virtual and work with a partner that was available to help us during that time frame when everyone was looking to make that move. But yeah, there's there were a few specific issues that we ran into as far as you really need to use this browser type and go into these settings to be able to enable certain permissions for your camera and your microphone to work, or and that's something that it's unfortunate, but I think for the most part people were pretty understanding in their experience. Mike, do you have anything you want to add to that?
Just that, we learned a lot, and I think people were understanding. Part of it was we did a lot of testing, but a certain part of it was that it's just kind of the scale. When we would do these small scale testing, and all of a sudden when you had several hundred people all of a sudden show up, what was working, sometimes we would run into a couple things with just the issues about, how many people were involved and so forth. We had tested and talked to everybody, just to make sure that based on what we were expecting, that everything was going to work. And you kind of just do the best you can and move forward. And at the end of the day, people were understanding. It was kind of our first year trying to do something like this. And overall, everything seemed to work well. It's just, probably in the back end, you notice it more than people out front, just because what's going on. But I think it went over pretty well. We just learned a lot.
Yeah, I think the wild thing with all that, this was, we did it quickly. And we just had there was no precedent for it as far as IAAO is concerned. We had no idea, what the attendance was going to be like, what people were going to react if they would be interested in attending. And, when we were meeting with these vendors, that was the first question. How big is your event? Well, traditionally our in-person conference might be around like 1,500 attendees, but I don't know, maybe 350, 400, 500, maybe at most for a virtual. I mean, that was the numbers we were throwing out. And I think we ended up with almost 1,200 people when it was all said and done. So, luckily the platform was scalable and it could handle that. But, the response was awesome. I know there's always, a wish list as far as features, both from a staff perspective and putting that on and an attendee perspective. And so, we're definitely going to be gathering that specific feedback as we look forward towards the future and more online things. So and the interesting thing too is, that we found was there was a lot of these companies that specialized in in-person meetings and in-person conferences that, the reality was those weren't going to be happening anytime soon. And so they were trying to pivot their own operations to be virtual. And so kind of wading through those and finding, the right vendor that can accommodate our needs and had the availability, but also had the experience in putting something like that on. And obviously every association's needs are going to be different and their expectations are going to be different as well. So as Mike said, it was a big time learning experience. And I think we're all pretty thrilled with the end result and look forward to, future events as well and making them, better, just like our in-person events. Every year we like to think that we're, implementing that feedback and making them better and better each year. So I look forward to doing the same with the virtuals as well.
I think it was fantastic. I attended everything and it was really great. It was, I think, a little better instruction on how to line everything up. Otherwise, it was, fantastic. And I can't believe the turnout. It was awesome. So, I think it was, in the short period of time you did it, because I think it was, Sean, I think it was July.
Yeah.
Because I'm pretty sure I didn't sign up for it until like the end of July because you didn't know where it was
Right.
going. So yeah, it was very quick, and I think you guys did a good job. So thanks.
Yeah, I think you bring up a good point on the instruction piece, and I touched on it on our last one as far as like doing beta testing and everything. So it's easy when you're on the back end of these things and you're working on these platforms and you're planning out webinars or virtual events or whatever, you're thinking about these day in and day out for months at a time, and so your perception of what needs to be communicated can kind of be skewed because you've already absorbed the knowledge, you already know it, and it's hard to start thinking about what your attendees might not know, and so that's when we try to leverage beta testing as much as possible, because that gives us valuable feedback from what the end users are experiencing for the first time and seeing it for the first time. So yeah, if you attempt any sort of virtual events or webinars or whatever the case, always grab a few trusted colleagues and throw them in there and see what they have to say about what doesn't make sense to them, because something that makes sense to me might not make sense to someone else, and be able to spell that out and use screenshots and all that fun stuff to make it as easy as possible.
I thought conference went well. I hope we don't ever have a solely virtual conference again, although it worked well for me. The part that was truly lacking was the personal interaction with other people. The training and all the classes were excellent. Having had the time to be in the library booth, but actually attend a training session at the same time was actually beneficial to me, because at conference you can't be in both places. But maybe in the future, to capture more people to attend conference, maybe it's a hybrid of in-person and virtual. That's all, you IT guys and your capabilities, and just be able to, because look at our online classes offering this year is really expanded, and I think it's really helped out a lot. I know several people that have taken the online classes and really liked it. So I think this forced a lot of things to go in the direction things need to go, but I hope it doesn't affect future conferences where in-person attendance.
Yeah.
Well, I thought the hardest part was interacting with the vendors. Although, as much as I tried to actually interact with them and get demos and stuff like that was a little harder than being there right in front of you. It's not impossible. It's changing how you do things. But you guys, as did an excellent job in how you guys reacted to the whole world changing in a very short period of time, and being able to go from zero to finished product in just a few short months just shows your professionalism all the way throughout. Because although it was disappointing not to go to Denver this year, it was nice to have conference, and to be able to one, get the education credits, but two, as limited as it was, be able to interact with other people, like my friend Manny down there that doesn't have his video going. He only has his picture. Oh, there he is with the Golden Gate Bridge behind him now. Sorry to call you out. But it was really nice to have conference this year and being able to participate, regardless of what the format was. And for Manny, go Dodgers.
Well, and we're all hoping that we can be in Chicago next year. So, we've got several months. That's the interesting thing about the in-person versus the virtual one is it was probably just as much work to put together the virtual one. It was just kind of in a different format. So, it's what we didn't do for the conference, we just did differently for the virtual. So, I mean, it was a busy summer for all of us. So, that's kind of the challenge if ever looking at something like that. It's just, it's either one is kind of a full-time event.
I'm really looking forward to Sean's bartending skills in the future.
I think he's going to charge for that next time.
Absolutely.
And those are great points. And, Mike, mentioned, it's when if you guys have to host some of your chapter meetings virtually again, the content can still be there, but just, take note and be aware of how it might need to change formats a little bit, or how you present it. You might need to, expand it or cut it down a little bit. Just knowing your audience and how you're delivering it. If there are sections of your presentation that really lean on the interaction, or there's some raise hand functions and things like that, but just think about that and trying to kind of mold it a little bit to become a little bit better digestible in a digital format. So you don't need to rewrite or scratch everything completely, but just keep that in mind as you guys host these meetings and put them together, and think maybe a little mini sessions if it's a little bit easier, and things like that. So that goes a long way. Ooh, looks like we have a couple comments here. So we had a comment about some collaboration tools they use is Miro or Mural for team meetings to work together. It keeps the energy going and provides people to participate if they don't feel comfortable speaking. WebEx meetings offer breakout rooms that we utilize for larger meetings as well. That's awesome. I'm not too familiar personally with Miro or Mural. I don't know if Sean or Mike are, but we'll have to check that out for sure.
And that, like I mentioned, it's there's a lot out there nowadays. There's new companies. There's a lot of companies that are acquiring other companies to add their feature set to their product. So there's a lot out there. So yeah, anytime that you guys want to talk through things or bounce ideas off, go ahead. And it looks like we've got that link to that product shared. So yeah, definitely check that out.
Yeah, thank you for sending that in. We can't hit home enough about how you guys are going through this too. Your feet are in the water with it. So your experiences, speak, they carry so much weight. They do. And so let us know what works for you, what doesn't work for you. Not even just, in terms of what we're offering, but like you said, like things like that, products you use, like other people on the call might not know what it is, and it might be something really awesome. So keep that, conversation going, share your experiences. It's a challenging year. It's different. We're all just trying to make the best of all the situations as we work with these. So, that's great. We really appreciate everyone sharing those. So anybody else have any, wonderful success stories before we get wrapped up here? I know we're at the top of the hour. I don't want to keep you guys too long, but if you guys have anything, feel free to unmute and share or send it in the chat. Scrolling through here, looks like we got all the questions. All right. Well, we'll go ahead and wrap things up. We really appreciate everyone's participation. It's a lot to cover, and everyone has a little bit different plate in terms of technology. So we appreciate you letting us share what we're working with. Hopefully you guys took something that you can run with and kind of make it your own. These, like this meeting, specifically, and as we continue to present this webinar series for you. So, GSA, again, big thank you to them for helping make this possible. We have a couple more chapters of this coming in the coming months, and we'll be sending out some communication on that, as well as the recording for this, which we'll get on our YouTube channel. And so if you missed any of the other webinars of this series, feel free to check that out. It's on a playlist in there as well, so you can watch all of those or hop around. And again, any questions you guys have as you work through, Jill's on the call. She's your best source for this, but if it's a question that is for any of us, she'll be happy to pass it along to us, and we can answer those and share any of our experiences or pass those links along to you guys. So with all that said, thank you guys so much for joining us, and we hope to see you again next month. Thanks, everybody.